The chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloths, transforming Bellissimo into something from another world, a world I didn't belong in. My feet ached in the second-hand heels I'd polished religiously before my shift, the thin straps cutting into my ankles as I balanced trays of champagne through the Friday night dinner rush. 6 months at Chicago's most exclusive Italian restaurant had taught me to become invisible, a ghost drifting between tables, refilling water glasses and clearing plates without making eye contact with patrons who spent more on a bottle of wine than I made in 2 weeks. "Table 7 needs attention," Marco, the floor manager, hissed as he passed, his cologne leaving a sickly trail in his wake. "VIP. Don't screw this up, Sophia." I nodded, swallowing hard. The restaurant whispers had already reached me, a private reservation in our most secluded corner booth. The owner himself had appeared, something that happened perhaps twice a year, nervously straightening paintings and inspecting wine glasses for water spots. I tucked a strand of dark hair behind my ear and made my way across the dining room, feeling the familiar hollowness spread through my chest. 26 years old, with a master's degree in Italian literature gathering dust while I worked double shifts to pay off my mother's medical bills, 6 figures of debt that grew despite every extra hour, every missed meal, every night spent sleeping on my cousin Ellie's couch instead of renting my own place. Table 7 sat partially concealed behind a tasteful arrangement of orchids. 3 men occupied the curved leather booth, but only one drew my eye, the one sitting in the center. Even seated, I could tell he was tall. His dark hair was cut short on the sides but perfectly styled on top, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He wore a charcoal suit that moved like liquid mercury when he shifted, the fabric catching the light in a way that screamed bespoke tailoring. No wedding ring, no watch. Unusual for men who dined here, most of whom wore timepieces worth more than cars. The 2 men flanking him were clearly security, thick necks straining against their collar buttons, eyes constantly scanning the room, hands positioned to easily reach inside their jackets. I'd seen their type before, though never quite so obviously armed in a fine dining establishment. I approached with practiced deference, eyes appropriately lowered. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Bellissimo. May I bring you something to drink while you look at the menu?" The security men didn't acknowledge me, but I felt the center man's attention shift, a tangible weight against my skin. I forced myself to look up, meeting eyes so intensely blue they seemed artificial, like something airbrushed for a magazine cover. I'd expected coldness there, but instead found something worse. Curiosity. "Portaci il vostro miglior Barolo, annata 2010 o più vecchio," he said in perfect Italian, his voice deep and smooth, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Bring us your best Barolo, vintage 2010 or older." The floor manager hovering nearby looked panicked, ready to rush over and translate. Before he could intervene, I responded automatically in the language I'd grown up speaking with my Sicilian grandmother. "Certamente, signore. Abbiamo un Barolo Riserva 2009 della cantina Conterno, che è eccezionale. Posso consigliare anche il Barolo Monfortino 2006, se preferisce qualcosa di più strutturato." "Certainly, sir. We have a 2009 Barolo Riserva from Conterno Winery that is exceptional. I can also recommend the 2006 Barolo Monfortino if you prefer something more structured." The silence that followed was absolute. The security men tensed, hands shifting subtly toward their concealed weapons. But it was the center man's reaction that sent ice through my veins. He froze completely, his glass blue eyes narrowing as they studied my face with new intensity. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then his mouth curved into something not quite a smile. "Dove hai imparato a parlare così bene l'italiano? Where did you learn to speak Italian so well?" I shifted my weight, suddenly aware of the dangerous ground I was treading. "Mia nonna era siciliana. Ho vissuto con lei fino alla sua morte. 3 anni fa." My grandmother was Sicilian. I lived with her until her death, 3 years ago. He leaned forward slightly, the movement causing his security to mirror him. "Come ti chiami?" "What's your name?" "Sophia," I answered, fighting the urge to step back. Sophia Russo. Something flickered across his face. Recognition. It was gone too quickly to interpret. "The Monfortino," he said, switching to English, his accent now distinctly American with just a hint of something else beneath it. "And bring 3 glasses." He glanced at his security detail. "They won't be drinking, but I want you to join me." The request was so inappropriate, so against every protocol of the restaurant that I froze. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not permitted to. I'm not asking." "First?" His tone hadn't changed, still conversational, almost friendly, but something beneath it made my skin prickle with warning. "What was your name again? Sophia?" Marco materialized at my side, his smile strained to breaking. "Mr. Vitale, it would be our pleasure to serve whatever you request. I'll personally retrieve the Monfortino and have Sophia bring it right out." Vitale. The name hit me like a physical blow. Luca Vitale, the man who owned half of Chicago's waterfront properties, whose name appeared in gossip columns linked to models and actresses, whose family had rumored connections to organized crime going back generations. The restaurant's nervous energy suddenly made terrible sense. Marco gripped my elbow, steering me away with fingers that dug painfully into my skin. Once we were through the kitchen doors, he rounded on me. "Are you trying to get us all killed? When he comes here, you smile, you serve, and you get the hell out. You do not engage. You do not make eye contact, and you absolutely do not speak Italian to him like your old friends." "I didn't know who he was," I whispered, my heart hammering. "I was just answering him in the language he spoke to me." Marco ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Just bring the wine, pour it, and leave. No conversation. And for God's sake, don't sit down with him." I nodded. But as I carried the precious bottle on a silver tray, I couldn't shake the feeling that something irreversible had just happened. My life, already hanging by a thread, had somehow just become more precarious. When I returned, Luca Vitale was alone in the booth. His security had moved to a nearby table, still watching the room with predatory focus. I placed the wine on the table with hands I fought to keep steady. "Your security," I began. "Don't need to hear our conversation," he finished, gesturing to the empty space across from him. His eyes never left my face as I hesitated. "Sit, Sophia Russo." The way he said my name, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth, sent a shiver down my spine. I perched on the edge of the seat, as far from him as the booth allowed. "I'm really not supposed to." "Open the wine," he interrupted, as if I hadn't spoken. With mechanical movements, I presented the bottle, cut the foil, and extracted the cork with the practiced efficiency that came from opening dozens of expensive wines each night. My hands betrayed me only once, a slight tremor as I poured a small amount into his glass for tasting. He didn't look at the wine. Instead, he watched my face, studying me with an intensity that made my cheeks burn. "Tell me about your grandmother." "My grandmother?" I echoed stupidly. "The Sicilian one." I cleared my throat. "She raised me after my parents died. She was from a small village outside Palermo." "What was her name?" "Maria. Maria Russo." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And before that? Her maiden name?" The question was so specific, so unexpected, that I answered without thinking. "Vizzini. Maria Vizzini." The change that came over his face was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a slight parting of the lips, but unmistakable. Recognition, followed by something darker. "Do you know what your grandmother's family did in Sicily, Sophia?" His voice had dropped lower, intimate in a way that made my skin prickle. I shook my head. She didn't talk much about the past. Just that there was some kind of family falling out before she came to America. Luca Vitale lifted his glass, finally breaking eye contact to examine the ruby liquid. "A falling out," he repeated softly. "That's one way to describe it." "I should return to my other tables," I said, moving to stand. His hand shot out, wrapping around my wrist with startling speed. His grip wasn't painful, but it was implacable. "You don't have other tables tonight. Marco has reassigned them." My heart skipped. "How would you know that?" The smile that curved his lips didn't reach his eyes. "Because I own this restaurant, Sophia. Along with most of this block." He released my wrist, his fingertips trailing lightly over my pulse point. "Now drink your wine and tell me how you ended up here, serving tables with a master's degree in Italian literature." The fact that he knew about my education, something I certainly hadn't mentioned, turned my blood to ice. I reached for the glass with numb fingers, taking a sip that I couldn't taste. "How do you know about my degree?" "I make it my business to know things." He leaned back, one arm extending along the back of the booth. "Especially about people who interest me. And I interest you because I speak Italian? Half the staff here speaks at least some. You interest me, he cut in, because you're a Vizzini who doesn't know she's a Vizzini. The cryptic statement hung between us. Outside our secluded corner, the restaurant continued its elegant dance of service and consumption, but it felt 1,000 miles away. I don't understand. No, he agreed, something like pity crossing his features. You don't, but you will. He lifted his glass in a small toast. To family histories, Sophia Russo. They have a way of catching up with us when we least expect it. I left Bellissimo at midnight, declining Marco's offer to call me a taxi. The cool October air felt good against my flushed skin, clearing the fog of confusion that had settled over me during those strange hours at Table 7. Luca Vitale had kept me there for nearly 3 hours, asking questions about my life with an interest that seemed genuine but predatory. When he finally allowed me to leave, and it was very much him allowing it, he'd pressed a folded bill into my hand that I later discovered was $1,000. Consider it compensation for monopolizing your evening, he'd said, his fingers lingering against my palm. I'd tried to refuse, but he'd closed my fingers around it with his own. Take it, Sophia. You'll need it. Now, as I walked the 4 blocks to the L station, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Twice I turned to check the sidewalk behind me, seeing nothing but late-night stragglers and a couple arguing outside a bar. Still, the sensation persisted. I was fumbling for my transit card when a black Bentley with tinted windows glided to the curb beside me. My heart lurched as the back window lowered, revealing Luca Vitale's face, shadowed but unmistakable. Get in, Sophia. We need to continue our conversation. I'm going home, I said, backing away. Whatever you want to discuss can wait until... Your apartment on North Richmond Street isn't safe tonight. He stated this like a simple fact. Neither is your cousin Ellie's couch. The mention of my cousin's name, of the place I actually slept, sent a jolt of pure terror through me. I froze, transit card clutched in my trembling hand. How do you... Get in the car, he repeated, his voice gentle but brooking no refusal. Please. It was the please that undid me. So incongruous, so unexpected from this man who seemed accustomed to immediate obedience. Before I could reconsider, I found myself sliding onto cool leather seats, the door closing behind me with the hushed precision of expensive engineering. As the Bentley pulled away from the curb, I realized I'd just made a terrible mistake. A mistake that would change everything. The interior of the Bentley smelled like leather and something woody. Sandalwood, perhaps. Luca Vitale sat beside me, a respectable distance away, but the confines of the car made his presence overwhelming. His driver and one of the security men occupied the front seats, separated from us by a privacy partition that rose silently at the touch of a button. You're frightened, Luca observed, his eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. You shouldn't be. You know where I live, where I sleep, what I studied in college, I said, pressing myself against the door. Men like you don't gather that information without a reason, and the reasons are rarely good. A smile ghosted across his lips. Men like me. Powerful men. Dangerous men. I swallowed hard. Men connected to organized crime. Instead of denying it, he merely tilted his head. Your grandmother never told you about your family? Nothing at all? She told me they had olive groves in Sicily, that she left after some kind of dispute. I watched his face for a reaction. But that's not true, is it? The olive groves existed, he conceded. As for the dispute, he reached into his jacket and removed a silver flask, taking a small sip before offering it to me. I shook my head. Your grandmother's brother, Antonio Vizzini, was once one of the most powerful men in Palermo. The family had interests in shipping, construction, waste management. The euphemisms weren't lost on me. They were mafia. They were businessmen who operated outside conventional regulations. He corrected smoothly. Your grandmother was Antonio's younger sister, his favorite sibling. When she fell in love with Carlo Russo, a policeman investigating the family, Antonio considered it a betrayal. In his world, there were lines you didn't cross. My head spun. My grandfather was a policeman, an undercover detective. He'd infiltrated the Vizzini operation, gathered evidence, won Maria's trust and affection. Whether he truly loved her remains debated, Luca's eyes never left my face. When Antonio discovered the deception, Carlo fled to America with Maria, who was pregnant with your father. They changed their identities, disappeared. That's impossible, I whispered. My grandparents came here legally, through Ellis Island. They had documentation, forged, Luca cut in, quite expertly, with help from rivals of your uncle who were happy to assist in humiliating him. Antonio spent decades looking for them, but they'd vanished completely. The Bentley turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the dark expanse of Lake Michigan visible through the tinted windows. We were heading north, away from both my apartment and Ellie's place. If what you're saying is true, I said slowly, how do you know all this? And why do you care about a family feud that happened before I was even born? Luca was quiet for a long moment, his profile sharp against the passing lights of the city. The Vizzini and Vitale families have a complicated history. Rivals, sometimes allies, occasionally enemies. When certain rumors reached me about a Vizzini descendant working in my restaurant, I was curious. So this is what? A courtesy call? A history lesson? My fear was giving way to confusion, then anger. Why tell me my family's allegedly criminal past? Why say my apartment isn't safe? Because Antonio Vizzini died 3 days ago in Palermo, he said quietly, and with his death, certain old protections expired. Ice slid down my spine. What protections? Your grandmother's brother never stopped looking for his sister, Sophia. When he finally tracked her to Chicago 15 years ago, she was already a widow. You were, 11? He discovered she'd lost her daughter-in-law and son, your parents, in that car accident, that she was raising you alone. The car slowed as we turned into the circular drive of a high-rise overlooking the lake. Modern and glass-fronted, it screamed exclusive and expensive. Antonio made a decision, Luca continued. Instead of revealing himself to Maria, instead of bringing her back to Sicily or exacting revenge for her betrayal, he chose to protect her from afar. He established certain boundaries, made it known that the Russo woman and her granddaughter were untouchable. My throat felt tight. I don't understand. Your grandmother may have hidden her past from you, but others knew exactly who she was, who you are. His eyes were intent on mine. When Antonio died, those protections died with him. Certain people with long memories and old grudges see you as both vulnerable and valuable. Valuable how? I managed to ask as the car stopped. The Vizzini bloodline carries weight in certain circles, particularly a direct descendant of Antonio himself. But I'm not. You are. Luca's voice was final. Your father wasn't Carlo's son. He was Antonio's. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. That's not possible. Maria and Antonio were always unusually close. When she fled with Carlo, she was carrying her brother's child, a final betrayal Carlo allowed to protect her. The timing of her pregnancy confirms it. My stomach churned with nausea. You're lying. I have no reason to lie, Sophia. His voice had softened. This is your heritage, ugly as some parts may be. The driver opened my door, letting in a rush of cold lake air. I stepped out automatically, finding myself in a private underground garage. Sleek vehicles lined the walls. A Maserati, 2 Ferraris, another Bentley. Where are we? I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. My residence, Luca said, emerging from the car behind me. You'll stay here tonight. I'm not staying with you, I said, backing away. I don't know you. You know me better than you think. He nodded to his security, who retreated to a discreet distance. And you're staying because there's a team of Calabrian enforcers watching your apartment right now. 3 more are at your cousin Ellie's place in Wicker Park. Fear gripped me again, sharper this time. Ellie is fine, he assured me. My people are watching their people. No one will move against your cousin as long as they think you might return there. The elevator required both a key card and a fingerprint. As we ascended, I pressed myself into the corner furthest from Luca, mind racing. Why are you helping me? I finally asked. If there's some mafia blood feud, what do you care? Luca's eyes met mine in the mirrored wall. Your uncle and my father had an arrangement. I'm honoring it. What kind of arrangement? A complicated one. The elevator doors opened directly into a sprawling penthouse apartment. minimalist and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and city. You'll take the guest suite tonight. We'll sort out more permanent arrangements tomorrow. Permanent? I shook my head. No. I'm leaving in the morning. I'm going to check on my cousin, pack a bag, and get out of Chicago. Luca moved to a bar cart, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers. Running won't help, Sophia. The people looking for you have resources. International resources. He held out a glass, which I reluctantly accepted. Your only protection now is association with someone they fear more than they desire revenge, and that's you? I asked, not bothering to keep the skepticism from my voice. What makes you so special? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. The Vitale family has spent generations ensuring that question never needs to be asked. He drank, watching me over the rim of his glass. Your uncle understood that, even if you don't. I set my untouched drink on a side table. I need to call Ellie, to warn her. Already taken care of. My people contacted her with a cover story about a gas leak in her building. She's staying with a friend tonight. He gestured down a hallway. The guest room is the second door on the right. Bathroom is en suite. You'll find everything you need. The dismissal was clear. I took a few steps, then turned back. What happens tomorrow? Luca had moved to the window, the city lights casting his profile in sharp relief. Tomorrow we establish your new position. My position? In my organization, under my protection. His eyes met mine, cool and assessing. The only question is what that position will be. The implication sent heat rushing to my face. If you think I'm going to... Get some rest, Sophia, he interrupted. We'll discuss the details in the morning. The guest room was larger than my cousin's entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and pale blue. The attached bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome. On the bed lay a silk pajama set with the tags still attached. My size exactly. The sight of those pajamas, the presumption that I would stay, that I would wear what he provided, sent a fresh wave of anger through me. I was being managed, handled, controlled by a man I'd met mere hours ago. I checked the bedroom door. No lock. The windows, sealed shut. 40 floors up, it didn't matter anyway. My phone had died hours ago, and I'd left my charger at Ellie's. I was effectively cut off, trapped in this beautiful cage with a man who dealt in threats and cryptic statements about my apparently incestuous family history. I sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears that had been building all night to fall. My grandmother, the woman who'd taught me to make cannoli and recite Dante, had been living a lie. My entire identity was built on fabrications. A soft knock at the door made me quickly wipe my eyes. I expected Luca, but instead found a middle-aged woman with a kind face and a tray. Mr. Vitale thought you might be hungry, she said, setting down a plate of pasta and a glass of water. Thank you, I managed. Do you live here? She smiled. I'm Mr. Vitale's housekeeper. I live in the staff quarters downstairs. She glanced behind her, then lowered her voice. He's not as frightening as he seems at first. Not to those under his protection. After she left, I picked at the pasta. A perfect cacio e pepe that would have been delicious if I'd had any appetite. Eventually, exhaustion overcame fear and confusion. I showered in the marble bathroom, reluctantly put on the silk pajamas, and slid between sheets with a thread count higher than my bank balance. Despite everything, sleep came quickly, dragging me under into uneasy dreams, filled with Sicilian shadows and blue eyes that followed me through unfamiliar streets. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows that had been dark when I fell asleep. Someone had opened the automated blinds remotely. Another reminder that nothing here was under my control. A soft knock preceded the same housekeeper, bearing a tray of coffee and pastries. Mr. Vitale asked me to tell you there are clothes in the closet. He'll meet you in the dining room when you're ready. She hesitated. He's been on calls to Sicily since dawn. The closet revealed more evidence of planning. Jeans in my size, sweaters, blouses, even underwear with tags from expensive boutiques. All of it exactly right, a fact that was both impressive and deeply unsettling. I chose the simplest items I could find. Jeans, a cream sweater, flat leather boots. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The expensive clothes transformed me from harried waitress to someone who belonged in this penthouse. It was a costume, a disguise that fit too well. I found Luca in a dining room dominated by a table that could seat 20, though only one place was set at the far end from where he sat with a laptop and several phones. He wore a casual charcoal sweater that probably cost more than a month of my rent, making him look younger, less intimidating than the suited figure from last night. The illusion shattered when he looked up, those blue eyes just as intense in daylight. "You slept well?" It wasn't really a question, as well as could be expected after being kidnapped and told my family history is a lie. His mouth quirked. "I didn't kidnap you, Sophia. I offered protection you desperately needed." "Protection from threats I only have your word exist." I took the seat farthest from him. "For all I know, you invented this whole story about my grandmother." "Your suspicion is healthy," he said, closing his laptop. "But unnecessary. Everything I've told you can be verified." He pushed a folder across the table. "Starting with this." Inside were photographs, old, yellowed with age. A young woman who was unmistakably my grandmother, standing beside a handsome, serious-faced man in a Sicilian street. More photos of the same man with other people, at what appeared to be business meetings and social gatherings. "Antonio Vizzini," Luca supplied. "Your grandfather, though he was introduced to the world as your great-uncle." I stared at the man's face, searching for resemblances. The shape of the eyes, perhaps, the set of the jaw. These prove nothing. "Keep looking." Beneath the photos lay newspaper clippings in Italian. My translations were rusty, but I caught phrases. Vizzini Organization, Police Investigation, Carlo Russo, Undercover Detective. The final item was a birth certificate, my father's, with Carlo Russo listed as the father, but with a birth date that made the timeline suspicious if my grandparents had only just arrived in America. "This could all be fabricated," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "It could," Luca agreed. "But it isn't." He poured coffee from a silver pot. "I understand your reluctance to accept this, Sophia, but time is a luxury we don't have. The men looking for you won't wait for you to come to terms with your ancestry." I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, welcoming its warmth. "What do they want from me?" "Some want revenge for old betrayals. Others see you as a potential asset, the last Vizzini, useful in reclaiming territory and allegiances in Sicily." He watched me over the rim of his cup. "All of them underestimate what lengths I'll go to in order to keep promises made to your uncle." "What exactly did you promise my uncle?" The word felt foreign on my tongue, connected to a man I'd never known existed until yesterday. Luca set down his cup with deliberate precision. "Antonio saved my father's life during a territorial dispute in the 90s. Years later, when my father was dying, Antonio came to him with a request: ensure his bloodline remained protected, no matter what happened to him. And your father agreed?" My father understood the importance of family, of legacy. Something dark passed over Luca's features. "When I took over after his death, I inherited his obligations, including this one." I pushed away from the table. "Well, now you've warned me. Consider your obligation fulfilled. I'll leave Chicago today. And go where?" Luca asked calmly. "These people have connections across the country, international reach. You'd be looking over your shoulder forever. I'll take my chances. Your cousin won't have that luxury." The words stopped me cold. "The moment you disappear, Ellie becomes leverage to draw you out." Nausea rose in my throat. "You said she was safe. She is. While you remain under my protection." He stood, coming around the table with a predatory grace that made me step backward. "I'm not your enemy, Sophia." "Then what are you? My jailer? My bodyguard?" I raised my chin. "You said something last night about my position in your organization. What exactly did you mean by that?" He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "I run legitimate businesses that could use someone with your education and language skills. You'd be compensated well. As a translator? An interpreter?" I laughed bitterly. "That's not what you were implying." Luca moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something custom and expensive. "What do you think I was implying?" Heat flooded my cheeks. "That there were other ways I could secure your protection." "Is that what you think of me?" His voice had dropped lower. "That I would demand sexual favors in exchange for keeping you alive?" Put so bluntly, I felt foolish. "I don't know what to think of you. I don't know you." "No," he agreed, "you don't. But I know you, Sophia Russo. I've had people watching you for months, ever since Antonio first informed me of his declining health. The revelation sent a chill through me. You've been stalking me, protecting you, even before you knew you needed protection. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with a familiarity that made me flinch. You work double shifts to pay your mother's medical bills. You sleep on your cousin's couch to save money. You visit your grandmother's grave every Sunday with white lilies. You read poetry in the park during your lunch breaks. You've been alone for so long, carrying burdens no one should have to carry by themselves. Each detail of my life, recited in his smooth voice, felt like a violation. Stop it. Why? Because it frightens you to be seen? His hand lingered near my face. Or because it frightens you that I'm the one seeing you? I stepped away, putting the dining table between us. What happens if I refuse your protection? If I just walk out that door right now? Luca's expression hardened. I'd have someone follow you, of course, try to keep you alive as long as possible. But eventually, they would find you. The Calabrians aren't known for their mercy, especially toward women they believe have cheated them of what's rightfully theirs. And what about you? I challenged. What do you believe is rightfully yours? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I believe in earning loyalty, not demanding it, in protecting what's mine, not exploiting it. I'm not yours. Not yet, he agreed with unsettling confidence. But we both know you have nowhere else to go. A knock at the door interrupted whatever response I might have made. One of Luca's security men entered, murmuring something in rapid Italian that I couldn't quite catch. Luca's expression darkened. When? He demanded. 20 minutes ago. The cousin's building. My heart stuttered. Ellie? What about Ellie? Luca turned to me. Get your coat. We need to move. Now. What's happened? I grabbed his arm, panic rising. You said she was safe. And she will be if we hurry. He gripped my shoulders. Listen carefully, Sophia. Ellie returned to her apartment to get some clothes. My people spotted Calabrians watching the building. We need to extract her before they make a move. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur. The elevator, the garage, the Bentley with its silent, efficient driver. Luca made calls, issued orders in a mixture of English and Italian. His entire demeanor transformed from the almost playful predator of moments before to something cold and lethal. I sat beside him, terror for my cousin eclipsing any fear I might have had of him. If they hurt her, they won't. Luca's voice brooked no argument. They want you, not her. But they'll use her to get to you if given the opportunity. The Bentley glided through Chicago traffic with unnatural ease, as if other vehicles sensed the danger inside and moved aside. As we approached Ellie's neighborhood, Luca handed me a small object, a sapphire pendant on a delicate chain. Put this on. What? Why? It's a tracker, he said bluntly. If we're separated, I need to be able to find you. The idea of being electronically tagged like an animal made me recoil, but the urgency in his voice convinced me. I fastened the necklace with trembling fingers. There's a microphone embedded as well, he added. If you're in danger, say Azure, and the security team will hear you. We turned onto Ellie's street, a row of renovated brownstones popular with young professionals. Luca pointed to a black SUV parked halfway down the block. Calabrians, he said grimly. They've been more efficient than I anticipated. He touched his earpiece. Status on the girl? Whatever he heard made his jaw tighten. Change of plans. He turned to me. Ellie isn't answering her door or her phone. We need to assume they've already made contact. You said they wouldn't hurt her. And they won't, as long as they believe she's useful in getting to you. He reached inside his jacket, removing a sleek handgun that he checked with practiced efficiency. The sight of the weapon made this nightmare suddenly, terribly real. What are you going to do? Get your cousin. Eliminate any threats. He tucked the gun away. Stay in the car until I return. I'm coming with you, I said, reaching for the door handle. Ellie will be terrified. She knows me. Luca caught my wrist, his grip like iron. If you walk into that building, you're giving them exactly what they want. They'll take you both. Then what do we do? Just sit here while... My question was cut short by the ringing of a phone. Not one of Luca's, but mine, which I'd left dead in my purse the night before. Somehow it was now charged. Luca nodded for me to answer, pressing a button on his watch that I suspected might be recording the call. Hello? My voice sounded thin, frightened. Sophia. Ellie's voice, high with panic. Soph, there are men here. They say they're looking for you. They won't let me leave. Ellie, are you hurt? I gripped the phone tighter. Have they touched you? No, but they... Her voice cut off, replaced by a man's, heavily accented. Ms. Russo, a pleasure to finally speak with you. The voice was cultured, almost pleasant. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance in Luca Vitale. Luca's eyes narrowed at the mention of his name. He held out his hand for the phone, but I shook my head. Who is this? I demanded. Someone with a vested interest in your family's legacy. Someone who believes that legacy has been... mismanaged. A pause. I would like to discuss this with you in person. Your cousin will remain our guest until then. If you hurt her, please, Ms. Russo. We are businessmen, not barbarians. The voice hardened slightly, but make no mistake. We will do what is necessary to secure what is rightfully ours. What do you want from me? Come to your cousin's apartment, alone. We will discuss terms. The line went dead. I looked up at Luca, who had heard every word through the car's integrated system. His expression was thunderous. I have to go in there, I said, reaching again for the door. Absolutely not. His tone left no room for argument. The moment you enter that building, you'll both be on a private plane to Calabria. I wouldn't be able to help you then. Then what's your plan? Storm the building? Shoot everyone? I shook my head. Ellie will be caught in the crossfire. Luca was silent for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Finally, he pressed a button, lowering the partition to address his driver. Plan B. Full tactical response. No casualties on our side. The driver nodded, speaking rapidly into a discreet microphone on his lapel. Around us, I became aware of movement. Men emerging from parked cars, others appearing at the corners of the street, all moving with military precision toward Ellie's building. What are they going to do? I whispered. What they're trained to do, Luca replied coldly. Eliminate threats. For 15 agonizing minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, sudden movement. The front door of Ellie's building opening. A group of Luca's men escorting my cousin to a waiting car. Behind them, more security personnel emerged, half-dragging 2 men in dark suits. Relief flooded through me at the sight of Ellie, apparently unharmed. Thank God. Luca's hand settled on my knee, a gesture both possessive and reassuring. It's not over. The men they captured are foot soldiers. The one who called you, their leader, isn't among them. As if summoned by his words, a sharp crack echoed through the street. A gunshot. Luca reacted instantly, shoving me down into the footwell of the car as the driver accelerated away from the curb, tires screeching. More shots rang out, one hitting the Bentley's window with a dull thud. Bulletproof glass, I realized with detached clarity. Luca had produced his weapon again, speaking rapid commands into his earpiece. Get the girl to the safe house. We've got company. The Bentley careened around a corner, throwing me against Luca's legs. I clutched at the leather seats, terror a living thing in my chest. Ellie is fine. My people have her. Luca pulled me up beside him as the car straightened out, one arm keeping me secure against his side. But we've got a tail, 2 vehicles. Through the rear window, I could see black SUVs in pursuit, gaining on us despite our driver's skill. Who are they? I gasped. The man who called you is named Giancarlo Bianchi. He believes he has a claim to the Vizzini territories through a marriage alliance 2 generations ago. Luca's voice was clinically detached. He's been waiting for Antonio's death for years, planning how to seize control. The Bentley swerved onto Lakeshore Drive, accelerating to dangerous speeds. One of the pursuing vehicles fell back, but the other maintained its distance. He sees you as the key to legitimizing his claim, Luca continued. With the last Vizzini blood under his control, certain old alliances would recognize his authority. Under his control? What does that mean? Luca's eyes met mine, cold as glacier ice. It means he would force you to marry him. Or his son. A political alliance sealed in blood. The barbarism of it, the medieval concept of forced marriage as a power play, left me speechless. This couldn't be real. Such things didn't happen in 21st century America. My people need time to secure a perimeter, Luca said grimly. We need to lose our tail. He leaned forward, speaking to the driver in rapid Italian. The man nodded, making a sharp turn off the main road into a tangle of side streets. The SUV followed, closing the distance. If they catch us, I began. They won't. Luca's arm tightened around me, but if something goes wrong, remember what I told you. Say Azure, and my team will find you. Why are you doing this? I whispered. Risking your life, your men, for someone you barely know. For a moment, something almost tender crossed his features. I told you. I made a promise. It's more than that, I insisted. No one does this for a promise alone. The Bentley screeched around another corner, momentarily losing our pursuit. Luca took advantage of the reprieve, turning fully toward me. Your uncle and I met several times in the last years of his life, he said quietly. He spoke often of the granddaughter he never knew, the last of his bloodline. He showed me photographs, surveillance photos, like the ones I later commissioned. He was proud of you, your resilience, your intelligence. The idea that this unknown man, my biological grandfather, had been watching me from afar, taking pride in my accomplishments, sent a strange pang through my chest. During his final visit to Chicago, Luca continued, Antonio asked to drive past your restaurant. He watched you through the window for nearly an hour. It was the closest he ever allowed himself to get to you. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected grief for a connection I'd never known existed. Why didn't he tell me? Why keep the truth hidden all these years? Because he believed you deserved the normal life his sister had sacrificed everything to give you. Luca's voice softened, and because he feared that knowing would put you in exactly the danger you're in now. The pursuing SUV reappeared in the side mirror, closer than before. Luca cursed under his breath. They're persistent, he muttered. Then to the driver. Plan C, the warehouse. I clutched the sapphire pendant at my throat. What's Plan C? The smile Luca gave me was grim. We stop running and face them. On our terms, not theirs. The warehouse district loomed ahead, abandoned industrial buildings casting long shadows in the late morning light. The Bentley slowed, turning into what appeared to be a derelict shipping facility. Heavy steel doors rolled open automatically as we approached, closing behind us with an ominous finality. Inside was not the empty space I expected, but a fully operational base, vehicles, equipment, and at least a dozen armed men who snapped to attention as Luca emerged from the car. Status? He demanded of a tall man who approached with military bearing. Perimeter secure. Snipers in position. The cousin is at location 2 with medical personnel standing by. Casualties? One of ours minor. 3 of theirs. Condition unknown. Luca nodded, his hand at the small of my back guiding me toward a glass-walled office in the corner of the warehouse. How many vehicles in pursuit? 2 confirmed. Estimated 8 to 10 hostiles. And Bianchi? Present in the second vehicle according to facial recognition. Something dangerous gleamed in Luca's eyes. Perfect. Inside the office, monitors displayed security feeds from around the building. I watched with growing horror as the 2 black SUVs pulled up outside the warehouse, men with visible weapons emerging. You planned this, I realized. You led them here deliberately. Of course. Luca removed his jacket, revealing a shoulder holster and the gun nestled within it. Better to deal with Bianchi now, on ground I control, than to have him hounding us indefinitely. Deal with him? You mean kill him? The calm way he discussed murder made my blood run cold. Luca's eyes met mine. I mean negotiate from a position of strength. Violence is a last resort, Sophia, not a first impulse. On the monitors, the men outside were positioning themselves around the warehouse doors. Their leader, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive overcoat, remained by one of the vehicles, speaking into a phone. "That's Bianchi," Luca confirmed, following my gaze. "Old school. Traditional in his methods and expectations. What does he want from me, really?" I asked. "It can't just be about marriage. It's about legitimacy, about bloodlines and the power they carry in our world." Luca's expression darkened. "Your grandfather controlled territories and alliances that have been in limbo since his death. Bianchi believes that with you under his control, he can claim them as his own. But I know nothing about any of this. I can't help him." "Your knowledge is irrelevant. It's your blood that matters to him." Luca checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. "Your presence, your public acknowledgement of his authority would be enough for the old families to accept his claim." A phone on the desk rang. Luca answered, his eyes never leaving the monitors. "Vitale," he said simply, then, "Put him through." He pressed a button, activating the speakerphone. Bianchi's cultured voice filled the room. "Mr. Vitale, this game of chase has been amusing, but I think it's time we discussed matters like gentlemen. You lost the right to call yourself a gentleman when you targeted an innocent woman, Giancarlo." Luca's voice had turned to ice. "Two innocent women. Collateral concerns," Bianchi dismissed. "The cousin was never in danger. As for Ms. Russo, she is hardly innocent. She is Vizzini blood. That comes with certain obligations." "Obligations you have no right to enforce," Luca countered. "Antonio made his wishes clear before his death. His granddaughter remains under my protection." A soft laugh came through the speaker. "Ah, yes. The famous Vitale protection. One wonders what price the young lady pays for such security." My cheeks burned at the insinuation. Luca's expression didn't change, but I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the edge of the desk. "Your concerns about Ms. Russo's arrangements are noted and irrelevant," he said coldly. "Now state your terms for leaving Chicago without further bloodshed." "My terms are simple. The girl comes with me to Sicily. She publicly acknowledges her heritage and my right to administer the Vizzini holdings. In exchange, her cousin remains unharmed, and you, my dear boy, get to avoid a war your father was wise enough to prevent." Luca's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Antonio would sooner see his territories burned to ash than handed to you, Giancarlo. We both know that." "Antonio is dead," Bianchi said flatly, "and his wishes died with him. The girl comes with me, or I take her by force. You have 5 minutes to decide." The line went dead. Luca turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You understand what he's proposing?" "He wants to use me as a puppet," I said, nausea rising in my throat. "To steal my grandfather's territories, whatever those are. Shipping routes, construction companies, waste management contracts, import-export licenses." Luca's eyes never left mine. "All legitimate businesses now, but with histories that give them special status in certain circles. Together, they're worth billions." The scale of what was at stake, of what my unknown grandfather had controlled, was staggering. And if Bianchi gets control of them, he'll strip them for assets, dismantle the charitable foundations Antonio established, and use the proceeds to rebuild the criminal empire your grandfather spent his final decades dismantling. Luca's voice hardened. Hundreds would lose their jobs. Communities that have come to rely on Vizzini support would suffer. My head spun with implications I couldn't fully grasp. What happens if I just walk away? Disappear somewhere he can't find me? You'd be looking over your shoulder forever. And the people who depended on Antonio's protection would be left vulnerable to whatever Bianchi decides to do with them. The unfairness of it all hit me like a physical blow. This isn't my world. I didn't ask for any of this. Few of us ask for the legacies we inherit, Sophia. Something like compassion crossed Luca's features. But we all must decide what to do with them. On the monitors, Bianchi's men had taken up offensive positions. One was setting what appeared to be explosive charges on the main doors. "We're out of time," Luca said grimly. "There's a secure room behind this office. I need you to..." "No." The word surprised us both. "I won't hide while people die because of me. This isn't a game, Sophia. These men will kill to control me," I finished. "So let me talk to Bianchi directly, face to face." Luca stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. Absolutely not. You said violence is a last resort, I challenged. Let me try to resolve this another way. There is no other way with men like Bianchi. There has to be. I grabbed his arm. Please, Luca. I can't have more blood on my hands. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. What exactly are you proposing? A meeting. Here, where your men can protect me. Let me speak to him. Make him understand that I won't be used as his puppet no matter what he does. He won't listen, Luca warned. Men like Bianchi don't accept rejection. Then at least I'll have tried, I insisted. Before people start dying in my name. Luca studied me for a long moment, those blue eyes searching mine for something I couldn't name. Finally, he nodded once. On my terms, he said. You don't leave my side. You wear a vest, and at the first sign of danger, we end the meeting. Relief washed through me. Thank you. His hand caught mine, gripped tight enough to ensure I understood his seriousness. If this goes wrong, it won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. If it goes wrong, he continued, say Azure and run. My men will cover you. 20 minutes later, I stood beside Luca in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by his security team in a protective formation. I wore a lightweight bulletproof vest beneath a loose sweater, cold comfort against the heavily armed men now entering through the main doors. Bianchi came in last, flanked by 2 bodyguards who never strayed from his side. In person, he looked older than on the monitors, his face lined with a lifetime of calculation and cunning. His eyes, sharp and dark, fixed on me immediately. Ms. Russo, he said, his accent more pronounced in person. A pleasure to finally meet Antonio's granddaughter. The resemblance is notable. I said nothing, feeling Luca's steady presence beside me like an anchor in rough seas. Bianchi smiled thinly. You have your grandfather's silence in the face of adversaries. Admirable, if ultimately futile. He glanced at Luca. I am surprised you agreed to this meeting, Vitale. It seems unlike you to take unnecessary risks. Ms. Russo requested the opportunity to address you directly, Luca replied coolly. I respect her enough to grant that request. How gallant. Bianchi's gaze returned to me, assessing. Well then, my dear, what is it you wish to say? I swallowed hard, finding my voice. I want you to understand that I will never help you claim my grandfather's legacy. Not voluntarily, and not by force. A bold statement from someone with so little understanding of the situation. Bianchi stepped closer, though still maintaining a careful distance from Luca's men. Do you imagine this is about choice? About what you want? I know it's about power, I countered. About using me to get what you couldn't take from my grandfather while he was alive. Something dangerous flashed in the older man's eyes. Careful, girl. You speak of matters you don't comprehend. I understand enough, I said, drawing strength from Luca's silent support. I understand that my grandfather chose Luca to protect me and his interests. That choice wasn't random or arbitrary. He must have had reasons to trust the Vitale family over others. Bianchi's laugh was sharp. Antonio was a sentimental old fool in his final years. He made decisions based on outdated notions of honor and obligation. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but they were his decisions to make. His legacy to direct. I straightened my spine, channeling a confidence I didn't entirely feel. And I intend to honor them. Honor? Bianchi sneered. What do you know of honor, girl? You've spent your life ignorant of your true heritage, serving drinks to strangers instead of claiming your birthright. My birthright, I repeated slowly. You mean the empire built by a man I never knew? The power you think I can hand to you with a signature and a public statement? I shook my head. It doesn't work that way, Mr. Bianchi. Not anymore. It works exactly as I say it works, Bianchi snapped, his cultured veneer cracking. The old families will recognize my claim with your support. Without it, they remain loyal to Vitale only because of a dying man's wish. Then perhaps you should consider why my grandfather trusted Luca with that wish, I suggested. Why he believed the Vitale family would protect his interests better than you could. Bianchi's face darkened with fury. Antonio Vizzini was a traitor to our traditions. He spent his final decades dismantling what generations had built, converting our operations into legitimate businesses, donating profits to charities instead of strengthening our position. He evolved. Luca spoke up, his voice deadly calm. He understood that our world was changing, that survival meant adaptation. You never learned that lesson, Giancarlo. Adaptation? You call it adaptation to abandon our ways? To kowtow to authorities and pretend we're ordinary businessmen? Bianchi's disgust was palpable. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become, Vitale. Something dangerous flickered in Luca's eyes, but his voice remained controlled. My father understood what Antonio understood, that our future depends on building something that can last in the light, not clinging to shadows that grow thinner every year. I glanced between them, suddenly understanding that this confrontation was about far more than me. It was about two visions for a world I'd never known existed, one holding to traditions of power and violence, the other seeking some form of legitimacy without abandoning its roots entirely. It doesn't matter, Bianchi said finally, his composure returning. The girl comes with me. The old families will support whichever of us controls Antonio's blood heir. And if I refuse? I asked. Bianchi smiled coldly. Then Mr. Vitale's considerable security forces will be tested against mine. Perhaps they'll even prevail today. But tomorrow? Next week? Can he protect you forever, Ms. Russo? Can he protect your cousin, your friends, everyone you care about? I slid down my spine at the implied threat. Luca tensed beside me, his hand moving subtly toward his weapon. There's another option, I said quickly, before violence could erupt. One that honors my grandfather's wishes while acknowledging the concerns of the old families. Both men looked at me with similar expressions of surprise. I'm listening, Bianchi said cautiously. I took a deep breath. A partnership, between the Vitale operations and whatever legitimate interests you control, managed jointly with profits shared according to investment and contribution. Luca stiffened beside me. Sophia, I pressed on. My grandfather clearly wanted his businesses to continue under Vitale protection, but if the old families have concerns about succession and tradition, perhaps a formal alliance would address them. A partnership, Bianchi repeated, his expression calculating. With you as a signatory, acknowledging both our interests. With me acknowledging that change doesn't have to mean abandoning everything that came before, I clarified. A bridge between the old ways and the new. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension in the warehouse was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Bianchi laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and reluctant admiration. Antonio's blood indeed. He too had a talent for finding the unexpected solution. He studied me with new interest. A partnership would need to be carefully defined, the terms precisely negotiated. Of course, I agreed, hardly believing he was considering it. With proper legal documentation and safeguards for all parties. Bianchi turned to Luca. And you, Vitale, would you accept this compromise? Share what Antonio entrusted solely to you? Luca's expression was unreadable. If that's what Sophia chooses, I would respect her decision. His eyes met mine briefly, though we would need to discuss the details privately. A faint smile played around Bianchi's mouth. I see. He straightened his already immaculate jacket. Very well. I will consider this proposal. My representatives will contact yours to begin preliminary discussions. His gaze hardened. But understand this, Ms. Russo. If I sense deception or delay tactics, my original offer will be the only one remaining on the table. I understand, I said quietly. With a curt nod, Bianchi turned to leave, his security detail closing ranks around him. At the door, he paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. You would have made Antonio proud today, he said. Remember that when you're finalizing our agreement. After they had gone, the tension in the warehouse dissipated like air from a punctured balloon. Luca's men relaxed marginally, though they maintained their vigilance. I found myself suddenly weak-kneed, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation draining away. Luca caught my arm, steadying me. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, he said quietly. Did I just make a terrible mistake? I whispered. His eyes met mine, serious, but with something like admiration in their depths. You bought us time, created an option where there appeared to be none. His fingers tightened slightly on my arm. But Bianchi is dangerous, Sophia. He'll expect this partnership to be formalized soon, and on terms that favor him significantly. I know, I acknowledged. But it stopped people from dying today. That has to count for something. For a moment, something almost gentle crossed Luca's features. Then his professional mask returned as one of his men approached. The building is clear, sir. No surveillance devices left behind. The cousin has been moved to the penthouse as instructed. Ellie's at your apartment? I asked, surprised. Luca nodded. It's the most secure location we have. Once Bianchi identified her, your cousin became a permanent part of this equation. His expression softened slightly at my concern. She's safe, Sophia. Shaken, but unharmed. I need to see her, I insisted. To explain. You will, he assured me. But first, we need to discuss what just happened, and what happens next. The ride back to Luca's penthouse passed in tense silence. I stared out the window at Chicago's familiar skyline, now transformed in my eyes. Behind those gleaming towers and busy streets existed another world. One of power struggles and blood legacies, of promises and threats, a world I'd been thrust into without warning or preparation. What am I going to tell Ellie? I finally asked, as the Bentley turned onto Lakeshore Drive. Luca, who had been answering emails on his phone, looked up. The truth. Or as much of it as you think she can handle. The truth, I repeated with a hollow laugh. That her cousin is apparently the heir to a Sicilian crime family? That men with guns threatened her because of me? The truth that you're in a complicated situation that affects her safety, he corrected. That you're doing everything possible to resolve it without anyone getting hurt. I turned to face him. Is that what I'm doing? Or am I making everything worse? Something almost gentle crossed his features. You're adapting to circumstances that would break most people, Sophia. Give yourself some credit for that. The unexpected praise warmed me despite everything. What would you have done if I hadn't suggested the partnership? Eliminated the threat, he said simply. Permanently. The matter-of-fact way he discussed what amounted to murder should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself oddly grateful for his honesty. And now? Now we prepare to negotiate with Bianchi while strengthening our position. His eyes met mine, which means formally establishing your place within the Vizzini Vitali organization. My place, I echoed. As what, exactly? The Bentley slowed as it approached Luca's building. That depends on what you want, Sophia. You've bought us time, but decisions still need to be made. In the underground garage, 2 security men met the car, escorting us to the private elevator. Luca's hand rested at the small of my back, a gesture that had become strangely familiar in the space of a day. What would Antonio have wanted for me? I asked as the elevator ascended. Luca considered this. He wanted you protected, first and foremost. Beyond that, he hesitated. I believe he hoped you might eventually take an interest in what he built. Not the original operations, but what they became. The legitimate businesses, the foundations, the charitable trusts. He was proud of the transformation. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Before I could respond, a blur of motion crashed into me. Ellie, her face tear-streaked but unharmed, wrapping me in a desperate hug. Sophia! Oh my God, what is happening? These men came to my apartment asking for you, and then other men with guns showed up, and now I'm in this crazy penthouse with people who won't tell me anything except that you're coming, and... Breathe, Ellie. I soothed, holding her tight. I'm here now. You're safe. She pulled back, her eyes wild. Safe? Soph, men with guns took me from my apartment. They said it was for protection, but what the hell is going on? Who is this guy? She gestured at Luca, who had stepped back to give us space. Why does everyone keep talking about your family in Sicily? I looked over her shoulder at Luca, who gave me a slight nod before disappearing down the hallway, leaving us to talk privately. Leading Ellie to the couch, I took a deep breath. It's complicated, and honestly, I only learned about most of it yesterday. but I'm going to tell you everything I know. For the next hour, I explained the impossible story that had become my life, my grandmother's secret past, Antonio Vizzini's hidden identity as my grandfather, the power vacuum created by his death, and the danger it had placed us in. I left out the most violent details, but didn't sugarcoat the fundamental truth. We were caught in a dangerous game of power and tradition. So this Luca guy, Ellie said when I finished, he's what? Your bodyguard? Your jailer? Your boyfriend? She whispered the last word with wide eyes. Heat rushed to my face. He's none of those things. He made a promise to my grandfather to protect me, and he's honoring it. Uh-huh. Ellie's expression was knowing despite her lingering fear, and the way he looks at you is just... Professional concern? What are you talking about? Soph, the man hasn't taken his eyes off you since you walked in. Even when he's pretending to be busy across the room, he's watching you. I glanced toward the kitchen where Luca stood talking quietly with his security chief, his profile sharp against the afternoon light. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up, our eyes meeting briefly before I turned away. It's not like that, I insisted. He's responsible for me, that's all. Ellie raised an eyebrow. If you say so. But responsibility doesn't usually look like... that. Before I could respond, Luca approached, his expression serious. Sophia, we need to discuss next steps. Bianchi's representatives have already made contact. That was fast, I said, surprised. He's eager to formalize the arrangement before I can change your mind. Luca glanced at Ellie. Perhaps your cousin would like to rest? The guest room is prepared. Ellie stood, her earlier fear giving way to protective indignation. I'm not leaving Sophia alone. She won't be alone, Luca assured her, his tone deliberately gentle. But the conversation we need to have involves legal and financial details that would put you at risk if you were questioned about them later. I squeezed Ellie's hand. It's okay. I'll be fine. We can talk more after. Reluctantly, Ellie allowed one of Luca's staff to lead her to the guest room I had occupied the night before. Once she was gone, Luca guided me to his home office, a sleek space with views of both the lake and the city skyline. Bianchi is moving quickly, he said, gesturing for me to sit in one of 2 leather chairs positioned before a glass desk. His lawyer contacted mine an hour ago with a preliminary proposal. What does he want? I asked, bracing myself. 40% ownership of all Vizzini holdings, board positions in the 3 largest companies, and a formal introduction to the old families with you, publicly acknowledging his role as your advisor and partner. Luca's expression remained neutral, but I sensed his disapproval. And what do you think? I think it's excessive, but not unexpected. He sat across from me, his posture relaxed but alert. The question is what you want, Sophia. What I want? I laughed bitterly. I want my normal life back. I want to not be responsible for billion-dollar enterprises I know nothing about. I want my cousin safe, and this nightmare over. And if those aren't options, he pressed gently. I met his gaze. Then I want to honor my grandfather's wishes, to protect what he built, what he transformed his empire into. I hesitated. And I don't want anyone else hurt because of me. Something like approval flickered in Luca's eyes. Then we counter-offer. 20% ownership for Bianchi, advisory board positions only, and a formal introduction that acknowledges his historical connection to the Vizzini family without granting him any authority over you. Will he accept that? Not initially, Luca admitted, but it gives us room to negotiate while my people finish compiling evidence of his less legitimate operations. Evidence? I echoed. A cold smile touched Luca's lips. Insurance. In case Bianchi decides partnership isn't enough after all, the casual way he discussed leverage and threats should have disturbed me. Instead, I found myself oddly comforted by his thoroughness, his readiness to protect what was, apparently, now mine. There's something else we need to discuss, Luca continued, his expression growing more serious. Your official role in the organization. Bianchi will expect it to be clearly defined before any agreement is finalized. I told you, I don't know anything about running businesses, especially ones with complicated histories. You'll learn, he said simply. Antonio left detailed records, and I can guide you through the transition. And if I don't want this responsibility, I challenged. If I want to walk away once Bianchi is dealt with? Luca studied me. Is that what you want, Sophia? To return to serving wine to strangers and sleeping on your cousin's couch? To pretend none of this exists while others manage your inheritance? Put that way, it sounded absurd. Yet the alternative, stepping into a world of power and danger I barely comprehended, seemed equally impossible. What if I'm not cut out for this? I asked quietly. What if I make terrible decisions that hurt people? You won't be alone, Luca said, his voice softening. Unless you want to be. The implication hung between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. I searched his face, those impossible blue eyes revealing nothing and everything. Why are you really doing this, Luca? It can't just be about a promise to a dying man. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne. When Antonio first approached my father about protecting you, I thought it was sentimental foolishness. Another old man trying to right past wrongs before meeting his maker. His voice dropped lower. Then I saw the surveillance photos. Read the reports about this brilliant, stubborn woman working double shifts to pay off her mother's medical bills, giving up her dreams to honor obligations that would have broken most people. Heat crept up my neck as he continued. I started having my own people watch you. Tell me about your habits, your struggles. I found myself... He paused, seeming to search for the right word. Impressed by your resilience, your loyalty, your complete obliviousness to your own worth. My worth, I repeated, unsure what he meant. Not your bloodline or your inheritance, he clarified. Your character, the way you care for your cousin, the kindness you show to difficult customers, the books of poetry you read on your breaks. The realization that he had been watching me for months, gathering these intimate details of my life, should have terrified me. Instead, I felt strangely seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time. So, what happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Now we negotiate with Bianchi, formalize your position, ensure your safety and your cousin's. Luca's eyes held mine, and perhaps explore what exists between us, beyond obligations and promises. My heart stuttered. And what is that, exactly? Instead of answering, he reached across the desk, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so light it might have been accidental if not for the intent in his gaze. Only what you want it to be, Sophia. His voice had roughened slightly. I protect what's mine, but I don't claim what isn't freely given. Before I could respond, his phone rang. The secure line dedicated to his security team. Luca answered with a curt, Vitale, his expression darkening as he listened. When? He demanded. How many? A pause. Lock down the building. Full protocol. I'll handle it. He ended the call, immediately standing. Bianchi's men have been spotted in the lobby. It seems he's decided to accelerate negotiations. Fear gripped me. Ellie is safe, he assured me. The residential floors are secure, but we need to move quickly. He crossed to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a safe. After entering a combination, he removed several files and a small velvet box. What's happening? I asked, standing as well. I thought we had an agreement with Bianchi. We have a preliminary understanding that he's apparently decided to strengthen through intimidation. Luca's expression was thunderous. A mistake on his part. From the box, he removed a ring, platinum set with sapphires that matched the pendant he'd given me earlier. This belonged to my grandmother. I had it resized yesterday. Luca, what? Bianchi respects only two things, power and tradition. He held the ring between us. A formal alliance between our families would force him to back down without bloodshed. I stared at the ring, understanding slowly dawning. You're proposing marriage? An engagement, he clarified. A public statement of intent that would unite the Vizzini and Vitale interests permanently. It would make any move against you an act of war against both families. This is insane, I whispered. We barely know each other. I know enough, he countered, stepping closer. I know you're brave enough to face a man like Bianchi to protect others, smart enough to find solutions where there seem to be none. strong enough to adapt to a world turned upside down in the space of a day. My head spun with the impossibility of it all. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Something dangerous and possessive flashed in his eyes, everything worth having. Before I could respond, a soft knock at the door preceded the security chief. "Sir, Bianchi is requesting a meeting. He's in the lobby with 6 men. Luca never took his eyes from mine. Tell him Ms. Russo and I will receive him in 30 minutes. Standard security protocols." After the man left, Luca held out the ring again. "Your decision, Sophia. Say the word, and I'll find another way to handle Bianchi." I looked from the ring to his face, searching for deception or calculation. Instead, I found only intensity and something deeper, something that made my pulse quicken, despite the absurdity of the situation. "This isn't real," I said quietly. "It's just strategy." "Is it?" He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "Perhaps it began that way, a solution to an immediate problem. But I don't make offers I'm not prepared to honor fully, Sophia. You don't even know me," I protested weakly. "I know the essentials," he countered. "The rest, we have time to discover." In that moment, standing in the fading afternoon light of his penthouse office, with danger pressing in from all sides, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. I held out my hand. Yes. The ring slid onto my finger with perfect precision, cool metal warming quickly against my skin. Luca's fingers lingered, tracing the pulse point at my wrist in a gesture both possessive and reverent. "Mine to protect," he murmured, his eyes holding mine. "Mine to cherish." Without warning, he drew me against him, one hand at the small of my back, the other cradling my face with surprising gentleness. When his lips met mine, the kiss was not the calculated move of a strategist, but something hungry and real that made my knees weak. When we broke apart, breathless, the world had shifted yet again. Whatever game we had been playing, whatever negotiation of power and protection, had transformed into something far more dangerous, far more real. "We have 28 minutes before Bianchi arrives," Luca said softly, his thumb brushing across my lower lip. "Time enough to discuss how we present this development to our unwelcome guest." "And after?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. A smile curved his mouth, not the cold expression I'd seen directed at others, but something warm and private. "After, we begin building our empire together." 3 months later, I stood at the window of what was now our penthouse, watching snow fall over Chicago's glittering skyline. Behind me, Luca spoke in rapid Italian on the phone, finalizing details for tomorrow's board meeting of the newly merged Vizzini Vitale Foundation. The partnership with Bianchi had been formalized last month, though on terms far more favorable than his original proposal. His face when Luca had introduced me as his fiancé had been worth every moment of uncertainty leading to that decision. Power recognized power, and our united front had left him little choice but to accept the new reality. Ellie had adapted to our changed circumstances with surprising ease, accepting Luca's offer to fund the completion of her nursing degree in exchange for her discretion. She visited often, gradually warming to the man who had turned both our lives upside down. As for me, the transformation from overworked waitress to heir of a vast business empire had not been without challenges. There were days I still felt like an imposter, navigating board meetings and financial reviews with the ghost of my unknown grandfather watching over my shoulder. But Luca was true to his word, guiding me through the transition with patience I hadn't expected from such a powerful man. And at night, when the business of empire building was set aside, we discovered what existed between us beyond strategy and convenience. What had begun as protection had evolved into passion, then partnership, then something deeper I was still learning to name. "The meeting is set," Luca said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. His chin rested on my shoulder as we both gazed out at the snow-covered city. "The Palermo representatives arrive tomorrow morning." I leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid strength of him. "Are they still concerned about my lack of experience?" "They're concerned about everything. It's their nature." His lips brushed my temple. "But they'll recognize your authority once they meet you. Antonio's blood runs stronger in you than anyone anticipated." Sometimes that terrifies me, I admitted. The idea that I might have inherited more than just his looks or his stubbornness, that somewhere inside me is the capacity to become what he was in his early years. Luca turned me to face him, his eyes serious. We all have the capacity for darkness, Sophia. The question is what we choose to do with it. His hand came up to cup my cheek. You've already chosen to transform what you inherited, just as Antonio did in his later years, to build rather than destroy. My fingers traced the lines of his face, still discovering the map of this man who had become the center of my new world, with your help. Always, he promised, capturing my hand and pressing a kiss to the palm. Mine to protect, mine to cherish. Yours, I agreed. The word no longer frightening but freeing. In choosing him, in choosing this life, I had found a strength I never knew existed within me. The strength not just to survive, but to thrive in this dangerous, beautiful world we now ruled together. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that transformed even its harshest edges into something magical. A new beginning, a clean slate on which to write our shared future, one decision, one day, one kiss at a time.